This is Priyanka Rajneesh giving an opposition fourth speech on the motion. This House believes that publishers have a moral obligation to refuse to distribute deeply offensive material. The proposition arguments I've anticipated is first, publishers are not neutral distributors, they are active participants in spreading ideas. Second, substantive 2, that deeply offensive literature creates real world harms. And last, substantive 3, publishers have unique power and therefore have unique ethical duties. Now, on the opposition, substantive 1, publishers should not become arbiters of acceptable thought. Substantive 2, exposure and scrutiny are better than suppression. And substantive 3, the primary moral duty of publishers is facilitating the exchange of ideas. With that out of the way, I'll begin. Judge, at its core, this debate was never about whether hateful literature is good. Both teams agree that racism, anti-Semitism, and literature that glorifies violence are deeply harmful. The disagreement is over something so much more fundamental. What moral obligation and responsibility does a publisher have? Before I move on to a comparison of worlds, I'd like to clarify two important issues that arose during today's debate. The first is that side proposition repeatedly treated refusing publication as though it was the same thing as preventing harmful ideas. These are not the same. Refusing to distribute a book through one publisher doesn't erase the idea, nor does it erase the possibility that the book can just be published through a different publisher. The question before us is not whether offensive ideas will disappear. They don't. The question is whether publishers have the moral obligation to act as gatekeepers. And that distinction matters because debate is about the role of publishers, not the existence of offensive speech. But second, side proposition asks you to accept a principle without giving you a workable limit. They tell us publishers should refuse deeply offensive literature, but never establish who defines that standard or how it changes over time. Throughout history, ideas that challenged religion, defended civil rights, or advocated for LGBTQ equality were considered deeply offensive by large parts of society. A moral obligation that depends on such a fluid standard risks protecting today's consensus over tomorrow's progress. With that clarified, let's compare the two worlds. In side proposition's world, publishers become moral gatekeepers. Before a book reaches the public, private companies don't just decide whether it's commercially viable or whether it's well written. They decide whether society ought to be able to read it. They believe this reduces harm because limiting publication reduces the spread of dangerous ideas. Our world begins from a very different principle. Publishers facilitate public discourse. They don't determine it. Harmful ideas are confronted publicly rather than hidden, allowing journalists, academics, and historians and readers to themselves to expose their flaws. We trust society to defeat bad ideas through open discussion and criticism, instead of asking corporations to decide which ideas deserve a platform. The key question then is which world is more resilient? Side propositions assumes that concentrating moral authority in publishers makes society safer, but authority is incredibly subjective. Different publishers will draw different lines. Political pressures might shift those lines, and controversial ideas, whether harmful or just unpopular, will always be excluded. Our world is more resilient because it doesn't depend on a single institution making the perfect moral judgments. Instead, it relies on more open discussion, public accountability, and the ability of good ideas to challenge bad ones. That model has historically allowed societies not only to just reject extremism, but also to recognize and embrace ideas that were once condemned. Finally, please consider what each side asks you to value. Side proposition prioritizes reducing the possibility that harmful ideas might reach readers. Side opposition prioritizes preserving a society in which ideas are tested, criticized, and defeated through open discourse rather than private gatekeeping. Even if you believe some offensive material causes harm, the long-term danger of giving private institutions the moral responsibility to determine what reaches us, to determine our public discourse, is far greater. For those reasons, we believe our world protects both intellectual freedom and honors society's ability to confront harmful ideas openly and honestly. That's why I'm so proud to close for the opposition.